Hi, everybody. We'll get started in 5 minutes. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Segue reading series. I'm Jay Sanders, and curated this season along with Stella Soman of Artist Space. And it's my great pleasure to invite you to welcome you to this special reading with the work of Richard Foreman and Francis Stark. My honor here to introduce Richard. I cannot think of an artist who's meant more to me than Richard Foreman. His artistic project, from his first play, Angel Face, in 1967, to his last, Old-Fashioned Prostitutes, in 2013, after which he retired from public view, fundamentally dismantled and rebuilt the art and experience of theater and performance, viscerally, structurally, and philosophically. During the span of 47 years, and nearly always here in New York City, every year he would write, direct, construct, and deploy a total theater of meticulously composed rhythms and actions, sounds, movements, objects, and words that were both plain and entirely hermetic at the same time. From one of his manifestos, to understand the work is to understand the cell and the possibilities and implications latent in the cell, just as the possibilities and implications latent in the atom and molecular biology lead to a view of life and universe. The end, in both cases, being a patterned energy system. Reach the preconscious, remove the personality. One might think here of Gertrude Stein. There is no there. You will write if you will write without thinking of the result in terms of a result, but think of the writing in terms of discovery, which is to say that creation must take place between the pen and the paper, not before in a thought or afterward in a recasting. It will come if it is there and if you will let it. Or Morton Feldman, do we have anything in music that really wipes everything out, that just cleans everything away? Or Jacques Tati, the star was primarily the decor. Richard's plays and manifestos express all of this and more. In my life, I learned that the only way to be near Richard Foreman is to work for him, as he's extremely shy and private. So I did that for a number of years. I had the privilege of occasionally attending a rehearsal. Richard's rehearsals were like no one else's, many long months and meticulous, to say the least. I spent 2 hours one afternoon, and my memory is that in that time, they worked on maybe 20 seconds of activity, consisting of sound cues, lighting changes, actors' glances, and eye movements, and the gesture of pulling a playing card out of a deck. To call the process claustrophobic would be an understatement. But this was a theater built of deployed and timed precisions that, in his own words, became living reverberation machines of consciousness itself, high, low, and everywhere perceptually in between. Another memory of Richard's plays is of him, every night during their extended runs, sitting on the front row at the soundboard, actively cueing live the myriad audio clips and sometimes the lights that were essential structural features of every single performance. His was a theater of keeping the audience wide awake, mirrors or glass so they could see themselves, powerful lights shining directly in their eyes, clocks showing the actual time, interruptions, shifts, nodes that indicated that their attention and their presence was indeed the recording mechanism, the canvas, the medium itself too. Then, when the final statement was made, or sound emitted, or object fell, the room went black, and Richard would scurry to the exit, disappearing before the lights came back on, so he didn't have to bear the attention on him as the author, the composer, of the astonishment, the abyss that had been individually and collectively experienced. It's very fitting to have Richard's work here at Segue, a playwright among poets, among composers and musicians, among experimental filmmakers, among philosophers. He achieved a radical extreme in his art that exceeded and utilized the means and systems of these forms as well. For this occasion, Richard is presenting a new text for the first time here on video. We went last week to his Wooster Street loft and made this recording. So thanks very much. I hope you enjoy it.
Roger Vincent long ago concluded that people who have something to say block the gods from speaking. But Roger Vincent remembers that God's speaking is to speak nothing. And he further understands that the God need is built into everyone, even those who believe that there is no God as such. Normally, like everyone else, Roger Vincent lives a life of habit and illusion. But suppose Roger Vincent suddenly asks himself, why not build a new world from flashes of truth alone? Could this mean twisting things, the less important the better, with the truth shining through the cracks in such unexpected twisting? But Roger Vincent is shocked to realize all available language is wrong. What does he mean by this? He vows never again to be captured by things spoken or imagined, both of which lead to a hunger for unapproachable meaning. Roger Vincent, however, dares to thrust himself into a space where things fly past so quickly that there is no avoiding an experiment of self-erasure, echoing God himself. But did Roger Vincent, then and there, lose all courage? Not at all. Because while lingering on this very cusp of death and confronting the paradox that the many abilities Roger Vincent has acquired are now all useless, Roger Vincent is no longer prisoner of a world he inhabits, like everyone else, only by accident. And in such a world, Roger Vincent improves himself by rejecting any and all varieties of paying attention. Since everyone who exists, including Roger Vincent, suffers from a built-in cramp mechanism that automatically clutches unto all identifiable objects, including those of little or of no value. But can one avoid this cramp mechanism by twisting whatever presents itself until it becomes unrecognizable to all but a few anguished human beings, each of which a mere nobody. Whatsoever, nobody whatsoever, but a nobody dreaming all the while of a voice so deep its rumble sounds all possible words, while an anguished Roger Vincent receives the pass key to all broken sentences. Because whenever the flash of an idea begins to grow and develop, Roger Vincent, in fact, separates from the world as it has now come to exist, where now all things are only so many potential memories. The man on the bridge selling stale cookies, the little girl crying her eyes out as she climbs back into her faded green dress. But if one dares to ask what's really going on here, then nothing will ever change. Because now the truth of things is still the slipperiness of things, leaving Roger Vincent alone with a deeper problem, which is, why is nothing that seems important happening here and now, where I myself am now, here and now? But might Roger Vincent twist that nothing important, twisting and then waiting for what? For whatever it might then become, because only an unexpected twist could reveal its intense possibilities. While the ordinary world chatters on and on inside its many disguises, while Roger Vincent, waiting patiently, is blindfolded to avoid being hypnotized by life itself, unfolding its full self under his penetrating gaze. Once blindfolded, however, Roger Vincent drifts towards what he fears most of all, seductive love, which traps the soul inside this ruthless universe, then waiting for the inevitable strife which alone may set it free. Is this why Roger Vincent uses the language of the birds to keep from falling back into useless thinking, clearing the ground by this means for a thing more powerful than language itself to appear? But why should Roger Vincent risk jumping into such a wild intensity? Is it because he has learned truth most often becomes falsehood the minute it's expressed? Is this why Roger Vincent himself, internally spinning, generates a radiance that will never fade, even beneath the bone-crushing weight of a world one never can hope to escape? Or does Roger Vincent dare to leap through the one door that is always locked? And then once inside, but how? Digging under the floorboards with a concentration that makes Roger Vincent forget the world as it now exists? And when someone at last knocks, Roger Vincent remains surprisingly paralyzed, even amidst the most frenzied dancing, which he at best only watches, with eyes darting back and forth, following the rapidly moving facade of moments that do intend things, because with no intending, one could never reach past where one now remains trapped. But in such moments, does a frozen Roger Vincent dare to dance the great anti-dance, trusting in strife, trusting in paralysis, while not yet trusting in dancing? Yet Roger Vincent does remain taut, like a drumhead or a painter's stretched canvas. And above all else, if Roger Vincent is nailed down upon a wooden table and force-fed many unpleasant truths before being slapped hard to return him to his not yet acceptable self, with a deep slurred voice whispering phrases that fold back upon themselves, devouring all recognizable words, while something other than words escapes, such an oppressive prison of cause and effect. Suddenly, a bright flash disrupting all experience of happiness or suffering. And at such moments, he realizes, oh my God, there exists behind all these things a mother lode of dense black material that burns in a fierce black fire. And this fiery mother lode is separated from us by layers of seemingly dense material named everyday reality, while the dangerous adventure of a few chosen human beings is to explore the intricate protective layers surrounding that black fire, and occasionally coming upon a small rift or gap through which one catches a glimpse of that terrible fire. But Roger Vincent never tells the truth about this fire, because, like all others, he has been persuaded that this truth must never be told, because there exists in everyone a cramp mechanism which shuts down when it touches what appears to be deepest truth. Question: what does a dead fish displayed on its side on the crushed ice of a display window in an empty fish store see or know through its one open eye? With a tiny toy ocean liner, also poised above both ice and dead fish, but in a separate world of imaginary human beings, beneath whom the dead fish seems to wait for possible messages from an alternative world, where a long ago dead child who once also existed, digging in a backyard, his very own hole again and again, hoping to find out at the bottom, or else a first birthday party with a tiny cake candle, shadowed by many adult legs seen striding back and forth below the cake above. Plop, giving up on adult eros. Plop, giving up on earthly success. Creativity arising only as a personal myth, when a certain Roger Vincent realizes that whatever language skills he has acquired, he remains nevertheless a prisoner of a world, hovering always on the void, on the cusp of unavoidable death, confronting multiple times the paradox that every acquired mastery is useless, because life itself has no need of a talented or even a one such as Roger Vincent himself. So Roger Vincent must completely refocus his effort. Eyes must learn how to burn through the occult surface of every life-generated paradox, secretly leaving invisible fire hides within. And if Roger Vincent were to proceed on the basis of what he knows already, when distortion is all that he has ever known, then Roger Vincent must never tell what he knows, because knowing, that is to speak whatever one knows, is to prevent the gods themselves from speaking. And while the gods speaking is to speak a powerful nothing, yet be careful, because if one comes close enough to touch the true depth of such things, close enough to be pulled under by such things as they truly are, then it's all over. Finished. Finished. That's enough, isn't it?
Thank you, everybody. We'll take a 5-minute break and be back with Francis Stark. And to our virtual viewers, you can make a donation through Venmo, and all the proceeds go to the writers. Thanks so much.
The so they uh, 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 it, uh, mm, that uh, uh, oh.
Und ja, Gott, ja, der, ja,
Can you turn on the mic? Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Segue. Okay, I'm going to introduce Frances Stark. For as long as I have known Frances, which has only been a couple years, but feels like a whole lot longer, she has never hesitated to tell me what is on her mind. I am always comforted by her brazen forthrightness, because sharing, or oversharing, the superpersonal is a condition we both share. Frances, however, also shares her business with the world, unabashedly, but of course, not without consequences. Those consequences, whether it be public criticism or coping with the embarrassment of just having said too much, are always fed right back into her work. Like an intractable feedback loop, awkwardness and shame, but also self-deprecating humor and intense pleasure reveal themselves again and again, building a meta-narrative that requires a protracted, careful reading over time. The closer you look, the more you might see yourself. It might be an awkward confrontation, but hopefully it's thrilling. As Frances writes, the reason she chooses to exhibit or publish is the possibility of being touched remotely by another person's mind, another person's set of decisions, another person's line, their story, their tone, their texture, because we want to be read closely, to be enjoyed, troubled over, taken seriously in this weird business of exhibitionism. Frances is known as a visual artist, and for over 30 years, Frances has used language as a primary material in her work. Beyond explicit references to writers and poets whom she communes with, like lovers or muses, people like Henry Miller and Emily Dickinson, the literal form of words and letters configure her surfaces. In one of her earliest bodies of work, titled The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, taken from the poem by T.S. Eliot, she traces excerpts from classic literature onto carbon paper. The excerpts, found in books, are annotated by anonymous readers. The subject, then, is its marginalia, revealing a conversation between a stranger and the text, and further, a connection between her and a stranger. In her 2011 video, My Best Thing, she transcribes interactions from an online sex chat between herself and two Italian men. The conversations are spoken by Lego-like figures through computer-generated voices. While stilted and robotic in movement and speech, their dialogue remains unnervingly intimate, an improbable closeness, again, between her and two strangers. I imagine that Frances's intense desire to connect with others also made her a great teacher at USC, where she taught art for nearly a decade. At a certain point, the endless bureaucracy and celebration of an intellectually restrictive pedagogy became too much. She felt her knowledge and experience could better serve a community outside an institutional paradigm. Whenever I've seen her engage with young artists or people coming from a non-art background, I have witnessed her entrancing effect. She is viewed as a wise and seasoned veteran of art, someone to emulate and learn from, most of all recognized for her uncompromising vision. And that is what makes her, as she calls herself, an artist's artist. Recently, I stayed with Frances in downtown LA in a garage that she converted into her home, which is actually mostly a studio. The studio itself, as a space, is a recurring subject depicted in her paintings, but it's in this space now that she has decided to live inside her work. When we spoke on the phone last week, Frances mentioned her reading will address the current state of her brain, and that she would attempt to track some of its possible decay over the past couple years. I asked her why this decay has occurred. She said it was probably due to her serious phone addiction, painful heartbreaks, and simply the frightening state of the world. She also told me she was nervous because she isn't in the practice of writing. She used to write all the time, but language or literariness seem out of reach at the moment. How could you, after all, access language in the face of an attention deficit crisis, when media and a mediated engagement with image and text have corrupted our minds? How could you write something authentic or original when writing has been neutered by the endless regurgitation of institutionally approved art speak, tending to affirm what we already know, not what we could discover? She has often asked herself, in regards to her own writing, why just quote others? Why can't you write your own thing? Why can you not just assemble yourself and write? A question she inscribed into a 2010 painting. Regardless, Frances told me she wanted to challenge herself to write something new. She mentioned the phrase casualty feeder report. This is a document that is produced when Army personnel have been injured or killed, which provides a forensic record of the series of events leading up to the event. Maybe she seeks to perform such a report on herself. I am not sure what she's come up with, but today we have the pleasure of finding out. Unfortunately, Frances couldn't be here in person, but her close friend, Moira Davey, another one of my favorite artist-writers, a New York icon, and fellow veteran of art and Segue too. She'll start out by reading an existing piece by Frances that she has selected for this occasion, and then she will bring Frances, an LA icon, into the room as a disembodied voice. Surely their minds have touched at different points along the way. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Moira.
Hello. Can I get this up a bit? Can you bring it up a little bit? Thank you. Is that good? Can you hear me? Okay, it's really nice to be here. When Stella texted me yesterday, can you do this? I wrote back and I said I should say no, but actually I'll say yes because it's Frances Stark and I love her and she's one of my, of all the artists, writers, I think Frances is my favorite. I was going to read something that she wrote kind of around Al Rupersberg, but then on the subway, I started to read the one right after it, which is kind of around Ed Ruscha, and I decided to jump ship and read this piece. It's called Always the Same, Always Different. I'm heading west from Chinatown, so I turn right onto Cesar Chavez, which is also, in fact, Sunset Boulevard. I'm driving Volkswagen Vanagon instead of my customary wagon because the station wagon's the car with the baby seat. Right now, I'm alone, free to cruise up Sunset Boulevard to check myself into the Argyle Hotel. The only hotel I've ever been in on Sunset Boulevard was the Tropicana, which is now a parking lot. I never spent the night there. I only, for lack of a more dignified term, partied there a few times in the early 80s as a kind of fourth-rate punk rock groupie, and not even with any bands worth remembering. But now I'm going to this landmark Art Deco hotel to celebrate my having been asked to contribute a text in honor of Ed Ruscha, one of the most consistently inspiring, solid, and profound artists of contemporary American art. I'm not going to celebrate with a glass of champagne, but by corralling my notes and whittling my sentences in a room with a view of all of LA. Sorry, that was a full stop. Between the driver's seat and the empty passenger seat, I've thrown down my laptop computer and my not exactly portable inkjet computer. Sorry, my inkjet printer, sorry. The printer's an awkward drag, but I still rely on hard copies. When making an imperfect stop or fast turn, I extend my arm out to ensure my writing hardware doesn't fly forward or tumble back. And this protective maneuver reminds me of riding between the two front seats of our 65 Ford Econoline van, occasionally flying into the back at intersections. My printer and computer suddenly seem more fragile and helpless than a kid who loves the thrill of a nicely managed tumble. Imagining the potential damage makes me think of Ed Ruscha's 1967 book, Royal Road Test, in which a manual typewriter gets thrown from a moving vehicle. The Royal was a memory-free machine, a handsome tool unable to bother with storing incomplete thoughts next to the best completed ones, unable to hold a person's artwork or photos of the artwork, and or photos that inspired that artwork on top of photos of that person's baby turning into a kid. Right before I left Chinatown to drive to Hollywood, I took my laptop downstairs to the Great Wall bookstore to find out what, if anything, the signs on Ed Ruscha's The Old Tool and Die Building said. I could make out only two familiar Chinese characters. I wasn't supposed to show anybody, but I figured this was entirely out of context. And besides, how else could I be sure that what I was looking at? Never before had I been unable to decipher the text on a Ruscha painting. Never before had I been unable to decipher the text on a Ruscha painting, so despite my thrill at the shock of utter illegibility, I still felt I had to at least investigate. The man behind the bookstore looked puzzled, and between strained Chinese utterances, he said, "It is not right, it is not right." "What is that?" his colleague asked. "It's a painting," I answered. They were somehow taken aback by my answer and then subsequently flabbergasted as they stuttered to make anything out. "Well, that's a Chinese character and that's one on its side, but nothing's really right," they said. I thanked them heartily while indicating with my face, quote, "as I expected," unquote. They looked so proud, as if they helped to discover an act of deception before it was too late. I went away smiling and even laughing a bit as I pulled out of the Mandarin Plaza parking lot. The radio was stolen out of the van, so I have to listen to the soundtrack of the percussive VW engine, but I also have a song in my head called Ed's Babe by The Fall. It came up when the word offspring leaped out at me from the cover of a catalog of a lesser-known body of Ed Ruscha's work, Birds, Fish, and Offspring. I had been wondering about whether it might be productive to give Ed's actual offspring, Eddie, a call and see if he couldn't come over and talk. Last time I saw him, his father's new paintings were still so top secret, I didn't even know what they were, and he wouldn't tell me despite my wanting to get to the bottom of the intense enthusiasm on his face. It wouldn't have mattered anyway, because we were with our two toddlers who were basically just crashing into walls and making any developed conversation pretty much impossible. Eddie probably knows Ed's Babe, The Fall's lamentation of life changed by a baby. A friend told me that the late British DJ John Peel often described The Fall as being, quote, always the same, always different, unquote. Quote, surely there is a better description of Ed Ruscha's work, unquote, said my friend. And surely no better example than the revised Tool or Die. He meant the tool and die, though that or is too good to ignore. And so you see, I also secretly told him about the painting on account of being positively unable to contain myself upon seeing it. On Sunset, right when you hit the 99-cent store, the Hollywood sign comes into view. Hollywood isn't even a real city, and I can't believe my dad hadn't bothered to tell me that until relatively recently. The Southern California roadside landscape has always caused factual minutiae to spew endlessly out of my father's mouth, whether driving cautiously down Skid Row in a station wagon, cruising brazenly down the Strip in a Corvette, or in a pickup tangled in freeway traffic and news radio. He would always keep me in tune with whatever he knew about whatever he saw. The impossibility of being able to assess each increment of change became especially clear whenever driving through Watts, the neighborhood where my great-grandparents settled in California in 1921. Their house is now a gas station. My father would always give quasi-Marxist explanations for why buildings and companies were where they were and did what they did, and who owned what, and how that might have mattered. TRW, IBM, Hughes Aircraft, Fluor Corporation, and any number of unassuming corporate headquarters inside of which our culture was perpetually and invisibly being transformed. In contrast, Richer's blue-collar tool and die tells it like it is. Inside, they're a tool and die outfit. They make things for making things. We tool and die. Not such a bad life for a lot of people, depending on the wages. In any case, that structure looks just like all those light industrial concrete tilt-ups I grew up amidst, and also just like this building my dad pointed out once on Olympic Boulevard, the Papermate pen factory where he worked the graveyard shift while attending City College. I called him to ask him about the pen factory and told him what I was up to, and he said, "Ed who? Venice what? Joan who?" But I told him about the drawing. Will 100 artists please draw a 1950 Ford from memory? And about the standard signs and the tool and die. Before long, he started calling me to share insights about what the paintings were making him think about, instead of just calling to report in monologue form about traffic jams or who's misusing their leaf blowers or overwatering their lawns. While skimming through Guacamole Airlines and other drawings with my dad on the line, I came across one of my favorite anomalous Richer drawings called An Average Guy. I teared up as I sat there experiencing Richer's average guyness touching an actual average guy. Oops, I'm not paying attention and forgot to veer left on Sunset, which leaves me on Hollywood, a lucky mistake because I need to pay a visit to the Hollywood branch of Washington Mutual, formerly Home Savings of America, formerly Coast Savings, whatever. As soon as I turn back onto Sunset, I encounter the following massive LED message. "You'll see why, just read it!" exclamation mark. I scrawl it into a notebook lodged between lap and steering wheel, and 2 seconds later, on the other side of the street, "You'll see why, just read it," there stands Empire Building, an innocent enough storefront saying everything without even meaning to. As much as that would be the perfect ending, there's still quite a few blocks before I hit the Strip and land in my hotel. I can see a big CNN logo up ahead, which reminds me, I have to confess, to sharing the old tool and die building with one more person, an artist whom I've admired since the early 90s. We finally met during the 2004 presidential campaign, so our conversations revolved solely around the news coverage of the war and the election, and regrettably, not each other's art. More recently, I visited his studio with a head full of Ed Richer instead of CNN, and it became obvious that he was indebted in the best possible way to Richer. This artist's insistence on being a comedian reinforced for me the importance of Richer's sense of humor, highlighting that certain economical audacity required to be equally funny and serious at the same time. I wanted to get into it with him, drive down a road from Richer to him, to me, making perfect sense of my own particular place and perspective art historically. But I was relaxed and happy enough in the passenger seat, a bit delirious still from having just seen Richer's newest paintings. Again, I couldn't help myself, and so I finally said, "There's this Ed Richer painting I'm positively dying to tell you about."
Okay, so now Frances is going to call us. So Frances, I know she's watching. Is that her? Frances?
Hi. Uh-oh. Oh, wait, that could get cool. Sorry. Okay, I've muted the thing. Hi, everybody. You're not saying hi back. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for being here. I'm sorry I'm not there, but here I am, kind of. I want to read. I want to thank Moira for reading that and coming as a proxy at the last minute. And I am going to begin by reading something that was ghost written for me, and then I will transition, and it hopefully will all fall into place. And by some serendipitous miracle, the piece that Moira chose is totally connected to what I will be sharing with you today. So I'm going to read from this abstract. An American Pavilion is an interdisciplinary multimedia project by artist, writer, and educator Frances Stark. The project will address the plight of citizenship under U.S. imperialism in the 21st century, and in particular, it will wonder how American culture can be better conceived, produced, and transmitted within the conditions of imperial largesse, and how the United States' unique geopolitical conditions inform expectations of what counts as cultural production under neoliberalism. Commencing with a series of intimately scaled, socially distanced group discussions, this is all during COVID, it was made, in Stark's home in South Pasadena, California, over the course of the 2021 school year, the project will culminate in a multi-volume artist book, a video, artwork, and a series of site paintings, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so the Ed Ruscha piece that Moira just read was essentially about, there was a theme about having a baby. So, and this is a piece that is sort of about the baby being all grown up. The project's title, An American Pavilion, derives from Frances Stark's recent invitation to make a proposal for the U.S. Pavilion at the Venice Biennale. Oh, also, obviously, that parallel. One of the art world's most high-profile exhibitions. Her bid was ultimately unsuccessful, but the baffling prompt of representing her country through her art compelled Stark to pursue the resulting questions on her own outside of formal institutional parameters. Instead, she resolved to compose a pavilion of sorts, using elements from her daily life. Her home in South Pasadena, her relationship with her son, who has just begun his senior year of high school, her voracious reading practice, which over the years has sharpened its focus on neoliberal political theater and our hideously divided American landscape, and her art practice, which has always mined the artist's own intimate experiences and intellectual endeavors for its content. Okay. Here I am now, over 20 years into the 21st century, and the mental state of disarray that I've attempted to express poetically and paradoxically throughout my career seems to have advanced into, quote, early onset dementia, at least according to one healthcare provider who covered my head with electrodes. Even so, I seem to cling to a lot of 19th century ideas about nature, love, and the soul and the mind. I was only trying to get my atlas adjusted, the part of the spine that directly connects the head and the body. But that place also advertised some other services, and being an advanced consumer, I let this charming quack take snapshots of my brain. Maybe it was because in an email exchange, he asked me about my most troublesome symptoms, and they were my inability to write for the project I was working on, and my inability to write the email I was writing to him. We spoke on the phone, which was easier, And he referred to the brain in terms of a cluttered house full of doors and hallways that may bar entry to certain rooms. This easy metaphor enticed me because I had been conceptualizing a grand art project that would take as its form my house, well, technically my landlord's house, which proposed to serve as an American pavilion as if I were the American artist to represent the United States in the Venice Biennale. An American pavilion was one of these umbrellas like The Architect and the Housewife, under which all my thoughts could be stored for later use and kept safe from the endless storm of so-called reality, or whatever it is that is always raining down from above, leaving me soaked and shivering in my bed, in my room, away from the elements. Really, the storm drain is my phone, and I've attached it to my brain, and I get confused between the elements of the actual world and the world as it rains down on us incessantly in a metaphorical shitstorm of inescapable storytelling one is meant to absorb and agree upon as reality. From my bedroom in my landlord's house on top of the ridge where Mike Kelly took his life 11 years ago, the sound of the real wind in a natural storm was a cartoonish horror howl. My place, the pavilion, despite its somewhat glamorous stature, felt like it could cave in any minute because all the leaks and structural damage had clearly only been tended to in the most half-assed penny-pinching manner. The landlord, incidentally, went to boarding school with the director of the museum that I hit up to support the pavilion proposal. I have never asked for anything like that in my career. I'm quite content taking what comes my way and not exactly imbued with sufficient amounts of hustle and ambition. Being at the literal top of this bougie ridge was kind of a joke in a way, but still a real summit of sorts. I considered it wealth drag. Since I had no gallery representing me in LA, if any collectors ever came to my studio, the stunning views would give off a success message in contrast to the stuff on the studio walls, much less majestic than the San Gabriel Mountains. The house in my grand scheme has a back house, and the landlord and his family lived there in a moldy, muddy pile of hoarded housewares and toys. Their benefactor, the landlady's father, was a well-known interior decorator and antique salesman who had gifted each of his daughters a piano. This daughter's piano, which I lived with, happened to be mirrored and out of tune. It was quite a conversation starter, and I do regret never doing coke off of it. I can't imagine the owners ever did. They weren't the coke party type, even though the house was all tarted up with a bunch of oversized Orientalist decor, which seemed more like some random surplus in a 3D sketchbook. The landlord preferred plastic bins full of random sale items from Ross for less, whereas little old me, the one whose parents never gave her a house or a piano, was stuck with the fun job of making their dad's weird high-end remnants blend in with my Pettibones, my Henry Taylor, my Jason Meadows, my Laura Owens, my Sonia Koncharovsky, my Silke Otto Knopp, my Julie Becker, my Eric Wesley, etc. The art of friends that constitute a kind of who's who of a certain generation of LA artists. A lot of this stuff hung in a grand entryway where Henry Taylor remarked upon his first visit, "This is some trustee shit." I'll never forget that. But in all honesty, it took me about 15 minutes to think of the word trustee. I was struggling to write any sentences in a timely, coherent manner. My German gallery sent their smartest envoy, and I talked emotionally for several days about what I was thinking, and he managed to turn it into readable paragraphs. That's what I just read you. It was high-level ghostwriting. I loved what he was able to do, which I thought no longer possible given the gray gardenification of my mind at that point. There were actual raccoons living in the uppermost part of the mansion, the folly, if you will. I would hear the litter of babies scratching away and was concerned the raccoon family might fall through the really disgusting portion of the ceiling in the defunct wet bar that was serving as a well-lit storage closet with a $4 million view. But if you remember, I've been trying to get at the shoddy state of my wet storage unit up here. That reason for my visit to the quote unquote doctor who put all the wires on my scalp to take a snapshot of my brain waves that would tell me I have early onset dementia. The good news was that I had genius level processing speeds, almost as fast as a Caltech astrophysicist he knew, so he said. Maybe she was a microbiologist. Whatever she was so far away from whatever I am. I just remember she was associated with Caltech. I was once associated with a prestigious institution, but in retrospect, it seems preposterous. I was once attending an astrophysicist comedy event at Caltech, believe it or not, and when Stephen Hawking arrived in the auditorium, his wheelchair went out of control and crashed into my aisle, and he kind of plopped over and slightly out of it right next to me. I like to say to people that he fell over on me, but he only fell a little bit over right next to me. I don't know what it is about me and my dead-end brushes with greatness. About a year ago, I was having dinner in Sunset Tower with a famous movie star. This is an Art Deco hotel on the Sunset Strip, and I have a special connection with the place because I used it as a performative endpoint in a text I was commissioned to write for Ed Ruscha's U.S. Pavilion, an exhibition called Course of Empire. What I did was drive the part of the strip from my studio in Chinatown to the hotel, essentially covering the part of Sunset that was not documented in his famous book. I rented a room, it wasn't cheap, and was meant to finish the writing under pressure in that luxury environment. Which I did, and you just heard it. So anyway, my art dealer invited me to a dinner with this famous movie star, and I was in an extraordinarily good mood because the night before I had finally kissed a man I had been smitten with for quite some time. So I was going on and on about my romantic misadventures to the movie star while managing to appear healthy and may have convinced him our culture had dementia and not me. When we parted, he told me I should write a manifesto of love. Did I do that? Of course not. I told you I can't really write anymore. I would rather live my manifesto of love. Thank you.
Thanks, Francis, so much. That was great.
Oh,
Still there? Okay, she's gone. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. Join us next week. We're excited to present Fanny Howe and Dubravka Zurich. So, and it's our final segue of the season. So please come.
This makes me proud to be British. This makes me proud to be British. This makes me proud to be British. This makes me
Relax, let a nigga chat breeze on the track. Who be letting all these girls in the back?